Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott.
And I'm your other host, Mark.
In each episode, Mark and I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching in the foundation and youth development phases. We will share our thoughts, ideas and experiences, and whenever possible include guests so we can get their insights and opinions too. Thanks for listening and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hello Marky, how are we doing?
Good. We're back again for episode 2.
Straight away,
yeah.
Hot off the first one. London buses.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. No buses for 6 weeks, and they too come around very quickly. Yeah.
So this one is all about managing player behaviour.
Yes.
The first things first. We had some emails way back actually, and this is me being a bit slack in getting back to two listeners, Matthew Passant and Alex Spears. Both emailed in slightly different specifics, but around the same theme of managing player behaviour.
Yep.
We actually have a few people mentioned that to us that we see as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
And we've had a few of that around the club as well.
Yep.
It is a common challenge for coaches and something that I think, can be quite complicated and difficult. So what we did was we reached out to a person that I had met through a work contact actually, a wonderful guy called Phil Beadle, who's quite a renowned teacher and has a relatively unique approach to classroom management and delivery. He's written books, he's presented, he writes articles, he's very well known in his circle and very respected, and rightly so. And he works in very challenging environments. So he works with some of the most challenging kids in school or kind of school related environments in and around London mostly, as far as I understand it. I mean, proper challenging.
Yeah. And
it just shows you actually, some of the skills and the techniques and approaches you can have that how you can get through to to young people who can be particularly hard to bring on board in a learning environment.
Yep.
So we got Phil's episode we can play in a minute, but before we get into that, Mark, I just what's your experience of dealing with behaviour, I guess, either from as a parent or from your coaching experience?
Yeah. So maybe we shouldn't go into the parent one, talk about my children's behaviour.
We should ask them.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's probably we should probably to own up and say the teams that we coach are from areas that are kind of reasonably nice areas. So I haven't had a great deal of experience of dealing with children that have been really badly behaved or have been hard to manage. Certainly there's been challenges I've had and I've had to kind of work with, but I haven't really had probably some of the experiences Phil's had and seen. I clearly haven't had those kind of experiences. But definitely there are challenges when dealing with different behaviour. And again, when you've got 15 players or 14 players in a squad, you're always going to have different players behave differently. Players get on, some players don't get on, especially when they go to the same school. And I had experience of two boys that clearly didn't get on at school, and there was incidents that happened at school. And then that kind of spilled over a little bit on the football field, both during matches and during training. So I had to kind of take them both out of with a training session. I had to kind of take them both out and speak to them and understand what the problem was and try and help them find a solution for it. So we definitely had some experiences there. We've had experience of, we had a player that he was a great lad actually, fantastic lad. He's got wonderful leadership skills for his age. And personally, I get really get on well with him. But you have to be on top of him, if that kind of makes sense. You can't give him too much space or wiggle room, otherwise he'll be messing around, or he'll be disrupting little disruptions like
low level stuff.
You'll be talking and he'll be kicking a ball, or bouncing a ball, or little things, right? Which is nothing in terms of behaviour. Is nothing. It's just little things you've got to kind of manage and be on top of, or and even things like maybe you don't let them have a football when you're talking to them. I had to tell them, right, footballs go over there when we're talking, or when you're talking to them, you don't have them facing the sun or something that's going to distract them. You kind of like have the sun in your eyes, kind of stuff. So it's little things that I've had experience of. I haven't had any kind of major issues, so I've been fortunate in that respect. Although I think maybe I'll take a little bit of credit that I think the environment I set up, it's clear in terms of expectations from players, what we expect from them, so they kind of understand that up front, that you come here to work hard. We have fun, but we come here to work hard, and we have serious fun, which is something that you've kind of mentioned in the past. So I think you set that environment up a little bit, but obviously there's going to be times where it's going to be tested, right?
And the kids change, don't they? They grow, don't they? And they go through their own changes and stages. And I think we'll hear about the dreaded teenagers that
exactly.
we're not quite there yet. But
I must say one quick story actually. I done a coaching session for a kind of, I guess, a lower league kind of development centre, and I just put on one session, so I didn't really know the boys. And I was kind of almost introduced as the supply teacher, and you could just see in their eyes that they just were like, "We're going to gobble you up now, mate. You're in a lot of trouble." So it was quite a challenging. I found that quite hard because I hadn't obviously been able to put the kind of environment I wanted into place in terms of setting expectations and things like that. In hindsight, maybe at the beginning I would have spoke to them a bit more about what I wanted, but I thought I'm probably a little bit fixed here because it is a development centre. It's not a kind of free for all. So yeah, that was quite challenging in terms of managing their behaviour and being on them all the time. It was quite hard.
It's so hard taking a group on, isn't it? Especially when you've had your own group for a while, that you kind of know, and you forget how much easier it is once you kind of have that one group that you've coached for a while to go and just. It's much more challenging just going. Being like a freelance coach or a session coach, who just go in and pick up sessions with different groups. I mean, that requires a certain skill set, doesn't it?
You enjoy good experience, by the way.
It's like in the last episode, what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you, right? So that's one of those things where.
Yeah, agree.
What about coaching your own kids? Because that was kind of one of the questions about, is there a different dynamic, do you think, and does player behaviour have an impact? I'm not speaking specifically, but just generally speaking, coaching your own kid do you think coaches can find that more challenging sometimes, or can the kids find it more difficult being coached by a parent?
Yeah, I think both actually. I coached my son for probably 4 or 5 years, and thankfully he's moved teams now, so I won't be coaching him next season, which I'm delighted for him. So he's going to get a whole new experience. But it is hard because. My view is that you just treat them fairly, you treat them equally. I think actually I'd probably go a little bit the other way, and maybe I'm a little bit more harsh, a little more tough on my son, and maybe he doesn't quite get as much as the other players do from me. So it is quite hard, and I'm sure he found it difficult at times as well. It's really rewarding, like when you see the kind of good, you can see through the good times and things like that. But if there is an element of maybe he's a little bit cheeky or he misbehaves a little bit, I kind of probably clamp down a lot more on it, a lot faster.
It's natural when it's your own kidney, you're a bit more tough with them, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, it's not always the case, but I think that's more common, isn't it?
Yeah, it is hard, and I think you could almost do another kind of podcast on that one about that one. But it is a good one, and obviously you've gone through it with your son now. And just tell us about some of your experience then of
I'd say similar to you, Mark. I mean, like, we've been lucky, haven't we? I do think part of it is set up, for me, one of the big advantages has been, I've said it before, coming from education helps a lot because you realise the importance of managing the classroom.
Yeah.
I've seen some cracking teachers that know their subject matter inside out but can't manage a classroom, and it really is a car crash. Yeah. And actually, sometimes not so good teachers can get away with looking pretty good just because actually they just can manage a classroom pretty well and build empathy and rapport with the students, which helps a lot. So I think taking some of that out into practice into training sessions helped me a little bit about the importance of setting up that dynamic early on and getting that balance the best you can, not always spot on, but the best you can between the players wanting to come and know it's going to be fun here, but also knowing that actually there's a line and we can't cross certain things, and there's got the respect has got to be there and stuff. So, and also we do live in an area where pretty much the players are on message with the parents, and parents want to be proud of their kids and they want behaviour to be important, and sometimes that can have a negative impact in the sense that the players aren't always as resilient and robust and as free spirited as some of the players we play against, and it's not by any means trying to say that's the best way to bring up a kid is to make them compliant, and
Yeah.
but we do live in quite a compliant area. But behaviour is no massive issues, and but A, because of the players we've got, and B, I think because we do get in early and create that environment and stuff. And I think I would struggle going into a team where we have some naughty players in it, because I've been sport with some good players.
Yeah.
But there are things you can do, right? And the idea of this is to share some of that out.
Yeah.
We'll listen to Phil's comments and stuff,
Yeah.
and hopefully that people will find it interesting. This is our first guest that's not purely football. I mean, he understands football. He's done a lot of work with football clubs, which come out in the episode, but he's not purely football. So hopefully it'll bring a slightly different dynamic to it. Have a listen and we'll catch up after, shall we?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, cool. We've got an extra special guest on. This is Phil Beadle, who I had the privilege of seeing through a presentation or through a work event that I was at, and was blown away by not just the content that you covered, Phil, but also the way in which you covered it and the directness. And I couldn't help but think, you know what, outside of the educational space, there's a lot for us coaches that work with children that can get a lot out of this. So, Phil, I'm going to shut up for a second or two. There may be some listeners out there that don't know who you are. I know you're a award-winning teacher, author, presenter, CPD, teacher trainer, education consultant, broadcast columnist, even some TV work, and a musician as well. So you've got lots of talents. But will you share with the audience kind of a bit about your background and what you currently do, if that's okay?
Who am I? I'm a 54-year-old school teacher from a working class background who accidentally 15 years ago, through a whole series of happy or unhappy accidents, became kind of quite well renowned. I'm best known for having done a television series called The Unteachables, in which I took, I think, 15 kids who are allegedly unteachable and proved that that wasn't the case and that no child is unteachable. I've written 11 books predominantly on teaching, but elements of that, behaviour management. I've even written a book about the last 10 minutes of the lesson. And I suppose it's very difficult blowing your own trumpet. I'm regarded as a kind of world level expert on teaching and specifically behaviour management and creativity. That's who I am.
Brilliant. But what about football then? What's your background in football?
I was at best a mediocre Sunday league player.
Yeah.
But I was obsessive in my youth about Queen's Park Rangers and particularly obsessive about Stanley Bowles. So, I've won a number of kind of national awards, but actually the finest moment of my life perhaps was being interviewed by the QPR fanzine as a QPR luminary. So
oh, wow.
I'm a Sunday league player, but I have, subsequent to having this career, I've worked, and this is a bit difficult for a Rangers fan to be saying, I was adopted by Brentford, and we were on a project with Ossie Ibanji that was the intention was to make football coaching evidence-based.
Okay.
Sadly, Brentford being such a left field club, just as we were starting going on it, they cancelled their youth scheme. But I've worked with Brentford, I've worked with Football League coaches previously. In fact, all of the Football League youth coaches have heard me speak. And I still have a borderline obsessive love of the game.
Brilliant. All right, you sound perfect for us. Well, Mark, who's the co-host who isn't here today, he's a massive QPR fan, so I'm sure
my condolences.
Brilliant. Well, look, the reason really for approaching you around doing an episode with us was we often get questions from coaches, and the question we get more than any other is dealing with player behaviour in coaching sessions and in matches. And obviously there's numerous reasons for that, and there's a whole story behind why these things happen and best approaches. But I was interested to know, really, from your experience, you work at the sharp end with some particularly challenging environments and students with lots of background issues there. From your experience then, if we're looking at children, before we talk about some of the ways in which we might manage behaviour, what issues do kids face that can impact on their behaviour?
The children have lives outside of school, like the adults have lives outside of school, and those lives impact upon their behaviour within the school. And so, consequently, you'll be working with somebody who you very, very much like and has always been a really good kid, and they'll come in one day extremely angry. And in the kind of environments that I work with, the key, the pivot to managing behaviour well is to be in control of your own behaviour. And what will happen is that, and your listeners aren't aware of this, there are two distinct forms of anger. One of which is kind of normal, healthy anger, and it's called reactive anger. And it's, everyone has it. You have a trigger, it causes a build-up of adrenaline, and that gets released in some kind of ridiculous display. The other form of anger is much darker, and it's well worth knowing about, and it's called manipulative anger or manipulative aggression. And when coaches will be in receipt of behaviour that they struggle to fathom out what's going on here, it's probably because they're in receipt of this psychological condition, manipulative aggression. So if, for instance, a child makes threats towards you, which happens to me all the time, or if they're deliberately hurtful, the intention there is to alter the status. And the way that they alter status and put themselves above you is by making you lose it. So the key pivotal quality of somebody that deals with young people, particularly those from challenging backgrounds, is to be in control of how you react. So if somebody behaves poorly, you have to respond to it. But if you act out on your first instinct, then that's going to be an emotive response, and you're going to lose control of the situation.
Right, and therefore make it worse. Okay, that makes sense. How would that look in practice? If someone's had a reactive anger behaviour, would that look different to a manipulative anger behaviour? Would it be hard for a coach to tell the difference?
Right, that's an intriguing question. So reactive anger, there's a trigger to it. Something causes it. What it will be is one person will be perceived to be to blame for this child being put into kind of an animal response to threat. And that one person will have been perceived to have taken actions that were both preventable and unnecessary. So reactive anger will be, say for instance, if a coach is shouting at a kid and the kid turns around and tells them to F off, that would be reactive anger. Manipulative aggression is more proactive than that. It will be, the kid will come in with an intention of causing the status to change between the coach and the students.
Okay, so it's not in the moment. They kind of, that's almost like something
No,
they've got planned or rehearsed.
In the moment's kind of fine, really. Yeah, it's healthy enough. Yeah, and in terms of reactive anger, what's worth knowing is that it's a physiological thing, and it always plays out the same way. So what do you do when you've got reactive anger? What you have to do is identify what the trigger for the anger is, and either take that trigger away or take the child away from that trigger. And it's well worth knowing as well that once a kid has erupted, then they remain in a hair trigger state for in the region of about 45 minutes. So that's why we time out in schools. So for instance, if you've had a fight on a pitch, what we tend to do, and it's rather foolish, is if two players have fought, then we'll immediately get them to shake hands, where actually what they need to be is away from each other for 45 minutes. Though, yeah, how coaches would deal with that, given that neither of them have probably been sent off, I don't know.
Well, that's interesting, because I think, like you say, for most of us, including myself, if I had that situation, then it would be a case of, right, I would assume I can fix it in about 30 seconds.
No, you can't. You can't, because
that's the wrong approach, is it?
It's seething. It's seething, and they remain in that hair trigger state. So, yeah, you've only got to look at the pro game where things get a bit messy in the last kind of 6 or 7 minutes. That if somebody has chopped somebody, then they're going to get it back.
It's then when it happens.
So, for instance, you go back to the World Cup. England were quite a well-disciplined outfit in the World Cup, but I do recall against Panama, I think it was either John Stones or Harry Maguire lost his discipline at some point.
Frustrated.
And everybody's screaming at Harry Maguire has to maintain his discipline at that point. But actually, he wasn't able to be in control of himself because he's in this hair trigger state. So you can actually apply it to the pro game.
Pros as well, okay, yeah. Is it good for coaches to have an understanding what some of these triggers can be from the outset, or does it not really matter what the triggers are? It's more the actions that takes place.
No, it's broadly always the same thing. Now, it's an animal. Anger is an animal response to threat. Now, that threat can be a physical threat, or it can be a threat of humiliation. What happens is that your adrenaline rises when you're under threat, and it's doing it for sound evolutionary reasons. It's giving you enough blood to your extremities for one decisive path of action, either fight or flight. And the issue with it as well will be that we don't realise that we're getting angry at points. So when you're actually becoming angry, when you're being triggered, all you notice is that you feel powerful. So actually, it can be a useful technique to help kids to recognise the signs that they're getting angry, because then in that instance they'll be able to control themselves. But the issue is controlling yourself. And if you're on a 11-side game with two 45-minute halves, the best way of controlling yourself is getting out of the situation.
Yeah.
Which of course is problematic.
And does this vary on age then? I mean, obviously you speak about the pros there, and does it make a difference if we're talking about like a 10-year-old compared to like an 18-year-old, or is it pretty much consistent?
Like, this is just anecdotal. What I would say is that as a school teacher with 25 years of experience, kids go mad in year 9.
Okay.
So they're properly insane. They start going insane in year 8. They go properly insane in year 9.
Yeah.
And generally get it back together by year 11. So you're dealing with a real kind of hormonal mess when kids are about 13 and 14.
And is that because the biological change is taking place within the brain?
It's to do with the brain chemistry and the development. They haven't developed certain pieces of brain chemistry, or pieces of brain itself, that give you the ability to control your behaviour. So their behaviour becomes much more risk-taking, risk-orientated, and much less controlled.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. For coaches then, when they've got maybe low-level disruption, so just players in their team that will come to training and it isn't session ruining stuff, the one thing they're doing, but maybe they're not little chats at the background or just kicking balls away and things like that. Are there methods in place that you could suggest to coaches that they could adopt to kind of manage low-level disruption?
Yeah, it's all to do, low-level disruption is all to do with teacher expectation. So, for instance, in the school that I've been working in this year, and it was a somewhat challenging environment, bless them, loved it. But you'd walk down a corridor and you'd see chaos, one classroom, chaos the next classroom, supply teacher being punched in the next classroom, madness in the next classroom, and then kids in my classroom sitting up straight back, engaging with Aristotelian rhetoric. And the pivot there is expectation. So they come into my classroom and they expect that they're going to learn some really tough stuff, but they are also aware that they get away with nothing. And so consequently, with one of my new classes, a brilliant kid, Paranvir, loved him. They had the potential to be quite a challenging class, and I had a confrontation with a young lady about her refusing to write on the second page of her exercise book, which I'm experienced enough to know that if I let that go, then everything's screwed. And Paranvir said at about the third lesson, he said, Bridie, you don't understand. It ain't about what we want in this lesson, okay? Not with this guy. What we want's not relevant. And in terms of dealing with low-level behaviour, it's about sweating the small stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? So the moment something happens, you have to call them on it straight away. And that takes probably about 3 or 4 sessions before the kids realise it's not about what we want here. Okay, This person is in control of the room, and that's how it should be. And as a result, so for coaches, if they sweat the small stuff straight away in the first 3 or 4 sessions, the expectation is set.
And it's great when you get the students self-managing themselves, right? So you've got one student correcting another one's behaviour. That's when you know you've cracked it, right?
That's outstanding behaviour management.
Yeah, very good. So expectations, and I don't want to oversimplify it all, but I think a lot of our listeners, parents, what kind of things can they do in a practical level with their sessions to kind of have that, I guess, create that environment in which players know when they turn up, this is kind of behaviour that's going to be expected. What would it look like in practice? What things could I do to make sure that my 12 players knew every time they turn up for my session from 8:45 to 10:15, this is the kind of behaviour we need to be doing?
Well, you learn to establish routines. So if we just have if we relocate that to a classroom situation, and it is exactly the same.
Yeah.
There has to be a routine for the start, and also there has to be some kind of challenging if kids are late, and there has to be. I'm no great fan of punitive discipline. I tend to avoid it, but it doesn't hurt making an example very quickly. So if somebody turns up to this first session late, plausibly it may be a little bit brutish, but go right. You can go home, okay? And I expect you to turn up, 5 minutes early next time. In terms of routines, what I've seen that works is making the kids get everything out and everybody having their own job.
So player ownership, kind of take responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what we do at the beginning is the kids realise this is the way that we do things here. And interestingly, in the work that I've done with pro clubs, so for instance, Fulham's youth coaches have a very distinct kind of Fulham ethos. So if a Fulham youth player meets an adult of any stripe, then they have to introduce themselves, shake hands, and it is like ethos is quite a way free construct really, but it's about setting up the way we do things here, the ethos at the beginning of things. So within my classroom, there's a particular ethos. Within the surrounding classrooms, there isn't an ethos.
You see the difference.
It's chaos.
Yeah. How important is it, Phil, the way in which that's communicated to the players and probably the parents and things? I mean, both in the instance of setting it up in the first place, but also then dealing with that behaviour when it maybe goes astray a little bit.
It's about not being emotive. So all the time, I'll give you a scenario. This happened a couple of years ago. I'd been brought up to a school in the East Midlands to teach them English, but one of the principal reasons they got me up there, and fair play to them, I thought they were very nice people, is they had a specific boy that the staff absolutely adored, but he was on a path to very, very, very serious naughtiness and to a really problematic life. So they brought me up with a specific intention that I mentored him. But he took one look at me and decided that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And about the 6th lesson, so he just point blank refuses to do any work that I've set him. In the 6th lesson, he finally picks up a pen, and I'm thinking, right, I've got you. I leave it a little bit for the task to develop, and then I come around just checking that everyone's on task, and it transpires that he's not actually doing the task that I've set, but moreover what he's doing is he's drawing a really quite elaborate drawing of the frontispiece of the school, on top of which were 2 eagles that were holding a banner, and this banner said F-U-C-K off Beadle. Now, in that instance, what is he looking for? He's looking for an emotive reaction.
Yep.
So he's looking for me to be upset or angry, and he's therefore looking to change status. So what we do in those instances is we just don't give it. We recognise that this is goal-seeking behaviour. We identify the reward that the behaviour seeks, and we just take that reward away. So in that instance, I just said to him, well done for spelling the first word correctly. I'm really pleased you picked up your pen. Off has actually got 2 F's, so my name's got a D in it rather than a T, but yeah, I'm really pleased you picked up your pen. So if kids are looking for a response, if kids are looking for a response, you just have to be quite analytical and go, right, what emotion is this kid trying to instill in me? So for instance, this has happened, if I go and feedback on a student's work and they will say, get out of my face, I'm going to hit you, what you have to do, and this is a really useful phrase for people working with young people, go cold. So in the instance where somebody's trying to get an emotive response from you, if you go cold immediately and then be analytical and go, right, what response does this child want? So in that instance, get out of my face, I'm going to hit you. What does the child want? Well, he wants me to be scared. So in which case, we just deliberately not be scared. Yeah, so my response to that is always, look, I would genuinely advise you not to do that. For a start, you will probably be permanently skewed, and that's a shame because I'm here to change you for the better. I'm not here to destroy your life. And secondly, it's probably really gonna hurt me. I don't like being hurt.
Yeah.
And there's also the element of it, and coaches have to be very careful with this, is that humour is, in more or less all circumstances, the really best way of de-escalating situations. So if the child's telling me that he's going to hit me, the fact that I'm laughing about it kind of redirects it onto an entirely different frame.
Yep.
So.
But I guess the danger is you could look like you're being sarcastic, or
yes, yeah. The coaches, and this is I have my own experience of being coached as a kid. It's well worth knowing that there's good humour and there's bad humour, and sarcasm is bad humour, and sarcasm hurts, and sarcasm will make children resent you. If you're going to laugh at something, laugh at yourself.
And we often hear, Phil, about, it's important that you challenge the behaviour and not the person, and I'm sure you'd agree with that. What methods can coaches adopt in which it's perfectly clear to the child that it's the behaviour that's being challenged and not them? Right.
Well, that again is another trap. So if you fall into the trap, and kids know this, of saying, for instance, you are naughty or you are a bad person, then actually what you're doing there is you're attacking the intrinsic. You're attacking something that can't be changed. So if I'm naughty or I'm a bad person, then I don't actually have to do what you say. Okay. because I can't change that. So by identifying behaviour as opposed to the person, you're identifying something that they're in control of. So if you are currently being too noisy, you're behaving too noisily when I'm speaking, then actually the child is able to change that. You are noisy. Well, that's a character that they have, and they can't change it. So, and there's also, as well, with coaches knowing that kids are very, very hip to when you fail to challenge behaviour rather than the person, and they will react really very strongly to it. So it's like a very, very central thing that you have to have as a part of your value system, that you never challenge the person, you challenge the behaviour.
I guess if you go back to a child that's misbehaving and you word it in a way or position it in a way that it becomes about them rather than the behaviour, that can almost fuel the fire for them to react even more aggressively, because it's more personal now.
If you don't like me, I don't have to behave.
And you said at the beginning, and I mean, we run a tight ship, and if you spoke to our players and parents, I think our little group is pretty good and the boys behave really well. But I do think part of that is, A, we had them from a very young age, but also, B, we put in good practices in place. And I think having a background education helped me a little bit with that. And I know that's an advantage for me. Don't always get it right, but certainly I think it's helped a bit. One of the challenges I think that I face, even having been a teacher, is picking the battles. And I would agree with what you said at the outset, is that you've got to have a pretty tough line from the beginning, set a high bar and keep it there. But would you recommend, or what's your thoughts on coaches and picking the battles in which they deal with behaviour? Should it be everything all the time, or is it right to let a few things go if it's the right thing to let go?
Sometimes the appropriate response is to ignore the behaviour. Okay, and it has a name. It's called tactically ignoring. So, for instance, and again, it's well worth coaches knowing this. There's two distinct forms of behaviour. There's primary behaviours and then there's secondary behaviours. Now, the primary behaviour, for instance, is a kid turning up eating crisps or being noisy, and we challenge all primary behaviours. The secondary behaviour is where they challenge the way that you're managing the incident. So, for instance, if you react rather than respond, and you react emotively, then a kid will, for instance, say something like, "What are you shouting at me for?" when you're not actually shouting. And the intention of that is, again, to give your adrenaline a little bit of tickle and to make you behave irrationally and emotively so that they gain the status off you. I've lost the plot. What was the question? Should you ignore behaviours? Yeah. So, in the instance with secondary forms of behaviour, sometimes the particular technique, the best technique is just to completely ignore it. So, for instance, if a kid says, "Why are you picking on me? Why are you always picking on me?" when you're not, actually ignoring that comment, because my friend describes it as chase me behaviours. So what the child wants is for you to chase them. Well, just don't chase. So you don't speak to the secondary, and you do tactically ignore. And there's another interesting thing about secondaries, is that they're either actively or passively expressed. So an active one would be, what are you shouting at me for, or why are you picking on me? A passively expressed one will be where they do eye rolls or exhalations, or just look at you like you're a nutcase.
Yeah.
And again, the intention's the same, to make you behave irrationally, to make you challenge it. If you challenge it, then you're actually just walking into their trap.
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes, let's make the distinction between the early bits of a session, the early bits of a relationship where you set out the ground rules and you let it be known that you will not tolerate low-level behaviour, and then when your relationship with them is a little bit more mature, okay, because it's at that point you can ignore things.
I get you. That makes total sense. And is it fair to say that in most cases with children and the way they behave, it isn't personal? Often the incidences that children can bring to you in a classroom or on a pitch as a coach, it's not about necessarily you as the coach. It can often be about their own experiences, their backgrounds, and
that's a very, very complicated question. But the pivotal element, because there's loads of levels to that, the pivotal element to it is, it isn't personal. And if you make it personal, then actually that's where things go really badly wrong. So if you allow, and it's a teaching phrase you've probably heard of, if you allow it to hit the child in you, then you will react like a child. And I wrote a book with a kind of real serious expert in behaviour management called John Murphy. And we outlined three, it is, by the way, entitled "Why Are You Shouting At Us?" And I think 50p a copy. And we outline 3 kind of key values of positive behaviour management. The first of which is that your belief is about what is possible outlines the outcomes you get. Yep. So if you believe that young people can achieve, then they've got a chance of achieving. If you set a limiting belief on them, then they've got no chance. And the second and most important is it isn't about you, and equally and counterintuitively, it's not about them either. All the time you keep it focused on the learning, then we depersonalize situations. So, for instance, you have accidentally, and I still do it now after 25 years. I commit 3 career-threatening errors every day. But if I allow my emotional landscape to take over, if I allow Charles' emotional landscape to take over, then we're not focused on what we're here for. So with your coaches, they're focused on improving their players' ability as football players and as team members. With me, I'm focused on improving their ability at writing. So all the time something kicks off, what you can do is just redirect back to the reason that we're here.
Yep.
So, okay, he said something about my mum. Yeah, but what about the work? So, and in truth, it's just the same technique that a mum uses with a toddler. No, don't look at that, look at that. So the cardinal sin of behaviour management is taking things personally. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be hurt, but again, there's a really nice sporting analogy. You're probably too young to remember, but there used to be a cricket player, a Yorkshire cricket player, called Brian Close. Now, Brian Close was not a particularly good cricket player, nor indeed a noted intellectual. And for some strange reason, they took him out to the West Indies to face the greatest pace attack of all time. And so you got Joel Garner chucking a bit of concrete down at you at 130 miles an hour. The key element with Brian Close is he didn't appear to experience pain. So
it's rather fortunate in that situation.
So he'd get whacked on the head. This is a days before helmet, and you'd actually see the welt coming out, and he didn't react to it. And eventually, I believe that England won that Test series when they were massively outmaneuvered and out-qualified, just because they just couldn't get to him. And there's an element with working with young people that, and it's a Brian Close phrase: don't wince when they hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, makes sense.
I've forgotten what I was going to say. So.
No problem at all. So I think you make some really good points there, and like I was saying, a lot of the coaches, we don't cover this stuff on coaching courses, so they don't get a chance to hear these things. And you've got a massive background in education, obviously all the experience you've got of writing and studying this and living and breathing it. For most of the mums and dads out there that are coaching kids at the weekends, they won't know this stuff. They'll only done the courses.
Well, the interesting thing is it's generally not known. And so I certainly in the first 6 or 7 years of my career, I'd had absolutely no training in it whatsoever, and I just made it. I was just very, very lucky to meet this head teacher that kind of knew everything, and I basically kind of gleaned everything that I could out of his mind. I have a lot of teaching experience, and I can write a little bit. So really, what I'm presenting here is actually John's knowledge, and John worked in a residential EBD unit for I believe 13 years, and so consequently this stuff is known in pupil referral units and EBD units, but not in the mainstream. It's also entirely absent from actually that's probably a little bit slanderous, nearly entirely absent from professional coaching. So I was lucky enough to be gifted the opportunity to talk to all the Football League coaches about behaviour management and motivation. And as a result, I went around 3 clubs, Fulham, Charlton and Brentford, who all had different ethoses. But I won't say which of the clubs it was, but in one of the clubs, not Brentford, I witnessed a training session with, and apparently in pro football it's a phrase, with a barker. And a barker is basically somebody that just shouts at people. And within professional football, there is an understanding nowadays that they have to have less of an abusive environment, and that they're working with young people, and actually, if you just shout at young people all the time, it's really not a very good strategy to employ. as a result of doing that work, I had to do a lot of research into why does shouting at young people not work, and it's related to metacognition and related to what's called goal orientation theory. If you're undertaking a complex learning task, which learning how to play football is the definition of a complex learning task, it's messy, it's open-ended, it's not a zero-sum game, then the key ability to get better at something is to be able to self-regulate. So being able to be in control of your effort, being able to be in control of your touch, being able to be in control of your temper. Now, there is a relation between that and goal orientation. I know this sounds a little bit overly wordy. On a complex learning task, there are 3 potential goals you might have. The first of which is mastery. You want to get better at the task. The second and the other 2 are performance goals. There's performance and then there's performance avoidance. Performance is where you want to be seen as being better than your mates, having a performance goal. And a performance avoidance goal is where you want to be seen as being not worse than your mates.
Right, okay.
Now, the research says that the moment somebody starts shouting at you, the research says that you lose your ability to self-regulate and that you go into performance avoidance mode. And if you go into performance avoidance mode, simply you stop learning. So if coaches are shouting negative feedback to students all the time, the impact on that in terms of the learning is they stop learning. Now, negative feedback is a very, very difficult area as well because we need it to become better. Yeah. But actually, we do not incorporate negative feedback into what are called our schemas. It's kind of quite jagged. So, for instance, if I was to tell you you are handsome and talented, you'd believe that, whether you were handsome and talented or not. If, on the other hand, I would tell you the exact opposite of that, you would refuse to believe that. Okay. So feeding back is a very, very knotty area for teachers and for coaches. And as much as education practitioners, we might regard this 2 stars and a wish thing as being infantile and stupid, which is 2 good things for every bad thing. There is some logic behind it, in that if you praise first and praise descriptively and often, then the student is more likely to be open to the negative feedback that we give them.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, it's funny because I'm visualizing what you said in my head then, and it's so true. Maybe it links into confidence here as well. So if you take a player and I've seen it, and they get shouted at in a match, or they just seem to be the one that kind of regularly gets a bit of the grief from the coach, you can see them plateau with their learning. You can see them, it's almost like they can't become that master. I've never heard it phrased that way before, obviously, but it seems like there's a limit then to how far you can actually develop because of they've positioned themselves in such a way, or they're in a space where they just don't feel that that's an opportunity for them.
Yeah, they're no longer focused on mastery. They're now focused on performance.
So as a coach, you put a ceiling on that learning straight away, haven't you? Okay, so all kids are different, right? Is there a case, if people listen to say, all right, it's all well and good, Phil.
Let's just see whether that's true. All kids are different. What do you mean by that?
I guess what I'm saying is when they come to us, they've all got different experiences, backgrounds, emotions, maturity levels. My challenge is going to be, there might be some coaching saying, it's all well and good, Scott, but you haven't got little Jimmy who, he's a proper pain, or he needs a tough word. He needs me to have this approach because that's what's going to get him through. Is there a case sometimes of having a different approach with certain people because you feel that's right for them?
If we drill down into all kids are different, well, no, they're not. They're all animals and they have animal responses to things. So you'll have a spectrum of very, very well behaved, kids whose lives have set them challenges that make it very difficult for them to self-regulate. The same stuff works with everyone. Now, ultimately, when I did the Football League education section, I started it off with what is the key? The key is to be nice. It's that simple. Because whether you're dealing with a person from a very functional family, a person from a very dysfunctional family, they all respond to the same stuff, which is be nice. And here's an intriguing thing for educators that are dealing with specific kids, is that there's nothing special about them. There is nothing special about the group of young people that you have. And if you start believing there is something special or unique about the group of young people that you have, then you'll start blaming them for being who they are. And that again is quite a cardinal sin. So if little Jimmy is from a particularly problematic background, what does little Jimmy need? You don't need to be shouted at. And there's that phrase in teaching which can be quite difficult, which is which kid in the room needs the most love is the one that's behaving in the most unlovable fashion. And so consequently, what do you do if you've got a kid that you're struggling to like? And it does happen. You just have to fake it until you make it. You have to be extra nice to them and give them extra positive feedback, and then eventually they stop.
Turn them around. It's true though, isn't it? But and I think in many cases it is that one that is the problem for the coaches, and because they don't know this stuff or haven't got that experience, that almost that becomes a bit that they resent about doing this role that we do. It's dealing with the little Jimmy who's a pain and they can't relate to him. There's no empathy there.
The problem with little Jimmy is not used to feeling safe. Okay, little Jimmy probably comes from a background where he feels unsafe time and time again, and so consequently, what do we have to do with little Jimmy? We have to make him aware that he is safe with us. And how do you make somebody aware that they're safe? It's pretty simple. You smile at them. Okay, you smile at them and you speak respectfully to them in a gentle and nurturing tone of voice. It really, behaviour management is not in any way rocket science. Yeah, it distills down into those two words: be nice. It works with everyone.
What about consistency, Phil? I mean, I think as coaches we can often I'm good with this. You get a fad, you think that sounds great, and you give it a go, and then you kind of bounce around a bit from week to week or month to month, trying different things. How important is it when working with children specifically that we're consistent in what we do? Or is it okay to be a bit inconsistent and do new things?
Consistency is very important in that young people have got rights, and they have a right to be treated with respect, and they have a right to know what they're doing when they enter a session. There is something worth knowing that sometimes consistency and fairness can bounce up against each other in an unpleasant way. So if you acknowledge that different kids have got different starting points, and so success for Tarquin during a session and success for Billy might be very different things. Now, if we acknowledge that different kids have got different starting points, then sometimes to apply a kind of behaviour rule consistently will be unfair on Billy. In that, Billy comes from a very, very challenging background. The fact that he's managing to get here on time in a pair of boots that are clean is a remarkable work of resilience and character for him to do so. Also, it's well worth knowing that you are maybe the most positive influence in Billy's life, and that comes with a weight of responsibility. So in terms of, if you find that being consistent is being unfair to Billy, then you have to err on the side of fairness.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Some really valuable stuff there, and I think we focus a lot on kind of managing or setting expectations around poor behaviour. If we're going to be proactive, what would you recommend for coaches to do to try and avoid some of these problems coming across in the first place? What could we do as approach to our sessions and the way in which we deal with the children that we've got to try and stop behaviour issues, or at least embed really good practice from the outset?
Yeah, but again, it's just about, it's kind of, I'll just reiterate what I said, I suppose to an extent it's like Roy Keane cementing somebody in the first challenge, that you have to go into the first challenge seriously.
Yeah.
And your first 2 or 3 sessions have to outline expectations, and you have to keep those expectations high and challenge every small piece of behaviour. After those first 2 or 3 sessions, when the kids realise it's not about what we want here, then things tend to run really smoothly.
And does that work, or do you need more time if you inherit a group or a class? If you've got them from the outset, I can see that you got them from day one, and you lay your expectations and you stick to those. Does it change if you inherit a group maybe that's there's coached, someone else been coaching for 5 or 6 years, or then they come to you?
Yes, because then you become the outsider. So you've got a group of individuals, they're used to being together, they have a pecking order. And the moment a new adult comes into the situation, the new adult is the alien. How should that affect the way that you behave? You have to be aware that they will challenge you at a very, very early stage. And you also, it's well worth knowing as well, where things go wrong is where the adult overrates themselves. So the adult makes a certain assumption that, they've been to school, they've been to college perhaps, they know a bit about the game, they know a bit about life, that they will be in charge of the situation. But what they fail to understand is that some young people are masterful at manipulating the behaviour of adults. So what will happen is you'll attempt to control somebody else's behaviour, and it's a game of chess, and they'll just go, no, I'm going to control your behaviour. So it's well worth adults understanding that this is a field, and it is a field that has experts and literature, and that actually you probably want to read up about it.
Yeah.
Because just going in with the arrogant approach that I'm the adult is not going to upskill you sufficiently to deal with a lot of manipulative young people.
That makes total sense. Does it make a difference if the problem comes in pairs or more than pairs? So dealing on a one-to-one with a student, I kind of get that, or a player. What if there's 2, 3, or a clique of players that are kind of got that approach to trying to disrupt a session or cause problems? Does anything change in that circumstance, or is it just the same as what you do on a
Yes,
one-to-one?
it does make a difference, because it's you against 30, you against 3, you against 5. So what we have to do is we have to isolate. So if you've got a particular clique, now in a classroom it's probably easier, because I'll set. So if I've had a nightmare class this year with several nightmare students. They all sit in corners of the room. So in a classroom situation you can do that. In a coaching situation, well, I would imagine you can do that, and you do that by pairings. You don't work together. Specifying who works together on which task. But also, if you're dealing with that situation, you have to understand that young people on their own are much nicer than they're in a trio. So consequently, what you do is you isolate them, and you speak to them as if you're speaking to a normal human being, and if you speak to them as if you're speaking to somebody you like and you respect, and you outline that this behaviour's got to change. But you do that individually, not with the three of them.
Is that because you can see a different side to the person once they're away from the other sometimes?
If you don't have an audience, you're going to behave differently.
Right, yeah, makes sense. Okay, and then this is the final question, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. It's just really around reward and punishment. I think you touched on it briefly at the start, but I just wonder what your thoughts on reward and punishment. Now, as coaches, you've got some that love to punish and penalise for behaviour and other things, and you've got others that love to reward.
Well, there's two sides to this. If one becomes so effusive in praise that the praise is flannel, then you'll get rumbled for that. But actually, I have this phrase about the ludic classroom. So my classrooms I would describe as ludic. And ludic basically means there's a lot of fun in it, and there's a lot of praise, and we play and we play and we play. And I'm aware that I create the temperature in the room. So the coach creates the temperature with the young people that they're working alongside. A positive environment is a much nicer place to be in than a negative environment. And so consequently, if you expect good things out of young people, you expect enthusiasm out of young people, you expect humour, you expect resilience, then it's the coach's job to be the role model of that.
Yeah.
Now, if the coach is consistently negative and the coach is consistently punitive, then that creates a negative and punitive environment. And again, as we touched on with goal orientation theory, a negative and punitive environment is where young people are put into an emotional situation where they cannot learn. And so consequently, as a school teacher myself, I deliberately keep things playful. We applaud each other all the time. We pick out the good things we like about each other's work. We do so in order so that we can open the young people up emotionally, and then they can be in receipt of negative feedback. But the notion of punishing, I'm profoundly uncomfortable with, and I think whilst there has to be consequences for behaviour, I think even the very word of punishment carries with it slightly sadomasochistic overtones.
Yeah.
And I would seriously question anybody that has that as a value worth upholding, that young people would be punished. I would seriously question whether they should be working with young people.
I'm so grateful for your time. I know you work in the sharp end of education, in some challenging environments with some challenging kids, and what you achieve in those spaces with what you have resource-wise, those tips you've given us can transfer really well into what is often an easy thing for us. We've usually got kids that want to be there, they're doing something they enjoy doing, so it shouldn't be a massive problem for us as coaches to be able to manage behaviour in the environments that we've got. But there's always those challenges, and having some of those tips and the things you suggested today, I know will be useful for our listeners. So thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Thank you, Phil. So that was Phil, Mark. I mean, what's your first thoughts after listening to that?
It was first. I think it was refreshing to have a guest on that's not purely focused on football. So I think that was wonderful, and I think there's a lot of great podcasts out there that go down that road. Right, I know Stuart Armstrong has a lot of different sports people on and non-sports people. So I think I think it's great to have someone who's not purely focused on football, and also we're talking about a specific topic here that cut across football, obviously. So I think it was great. I was very disappointed not to get there. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. I'm sure the listeners are happy that I wasn't able to get there. They didn't have to listen to me asking questions. But
I sat out in the sunshine. It was a lovely.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. So I think it was really, really good, and there was some great. I made a few notes I've made quite a few notes, but a few key points that I've got on here, which definitely kind of made me start to think about things in terms of training, and not just think about changing, but there's things that I think I do that actually he spoke about. So I was pleased about that. But you're obviously there with Phil. What was your kind of what were your thoughts?
It was interesting because you're conscious of the fact that it's not purely talking about football context, although he did his best and he kind of gets the environment that we work in and the space. I found it interesting. I kind of thought what comes across is really, you can have the techniques and there was some good advice and good tips there, but a lot of it is about your execution, isn't it? It's about how you deliver this stuff. It is important to have that kind of personality in which you can engage with the players, particularly the ones that you might have issues with, because if you haven't got that engagement with them and that rapport with them, it's going to be really hard to manage the situation. And I imagine the older they get, the harder that is. You know, working with younger ones, mostly speaking, they tend to be quite compliant anyway. I mean, I've seen kids at 6, 7 that aren't compliant, but the more you can get on with them and the more you can kind of understand their circumstances, their situation, and then tailor your response accordingly, really, really helps.
I think building rapport one is really important with all players. I think we spoke about it in the last podcast as well, and I think and the last series. So you've got to know your players for a start, and you've almost got to get on the same wavelength, which is quite easy for me because I think my mental age is about 7 to 10. So I think that's really important. I think one of the other points I was pick up on was he spoke about picking your battles, right? When to kind of go, when not to go, which I thought was a real interesting one, because I've always thought that maybe you would kind of stop things at first. Something happens, you kind of you're in there and you kind of like try to manage the behaviour straight away, but maybe that isn't always the right approach. Maybe you kind of, as you said, you kind of pick your battles and you kind of choose when to do it more so.
I think that, and this is where I think this topic comes up quite a lot and is one of the most challenging for coaches, because coaching is a craft, so it's a blend of that science and art. And I think managing behaviour is one of the most stronger craft elements in coaching, because it is exactly that. You can't say, right, deal with everything straight away, or ignore everything straight away, or do this and don't deal with that. It really is about you getting a sense of it in the moment about, okay, can I let that ball kick go away for now, deal with that boy in a minute about that, you know, or do I need to jump on that straight away? Do I need to stop my sessions, deal with that incident there, or can I let things go? Will a look do it? Am I better off ignoring it? Should I rule the good behaviour and forget about the bad behaviour? It really is it is a craft. But it's such an important one to try and get good at like a bit like communication, isn't it? I mean, and they relate in many ways. But then, you know, if you can really hone that craft of dealing with, you know, the things you do decide to address and don't, then, you know, I reckon that's one of the best ways in which you create that environment of learning. It might not happen straight away in your first session. It might take weeks and even months to get it quite just right. But if you know, the players then get a sense of, okay, I know that Scott's going to not accept that, or I can get away with it, can tell him off in a minute for that. But what you're not then doing is disrupting the whole session every 5 minutes, that's, you know, to deal with one or two kids, because like that's not right. I when I was teaching, I had one rule in the classroom, and it was quite a good rule in the sense that kind of got everyone. It wasn't one rule, but it was my main rule would be like, I worked with, I taught quite older kids, usually mostly post 16, and sometimes quite challenging kids. But it was, you know, I didn't mean this, but I'd always say to them, I don't care what you do in the classroom, but what you do mustn't impact anybody else.
Yeah.
Now it's a bit of a kind of a salesy kind of position, because actually there's not much you can do, it doesn't impact other people. So, but I'll be like, always say, like, do what you want, no problem at all. But if it disturbs someone else, then I'm not having that, and you're going to be gone out of the classroom, because and I say to them, do you think that's fair? Am I right to say? They'd be like, yeah, that's, you can't argue with that, because I don't mind you ruin your own education, but don't ruin the person next to you. That's not fair, is it? And they'd be like, no.
So you're engaging with them, right? You're kind of setting the ground rules with
trying
them,
to be fair,
and getting them to buy into it.
If they can buy into the reason you're setting the expectations, and if you want even rules you got in place, then I think it makes it a lot more manageable. Now, don't get me wrong, doesn't mean they won't do it and cross the line. But then when you can say, hold on a minute, did we not speak about that? Did we not say that you wouldn't do that? Oh, we did. Am I being unreasonable in bringing it up? Why are you having a go? And you can almost talk. I mean, they were older, talk to them like adults a bit more, but kids get that too. And the more you can agree those expectations and stick to it, the better. It is true. I think if you fight every battle and you say, well, I'm going to have a disciplined approach now and I'm going to stick to these things, that won't last 2 minutes, because the other kids will start playing up because their body will be turning off the other kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It can be a bit of a fine line.
It's a juggling act, right?
Yeah.
I did write a blog, actually, and I did this before I sat with Phil, so I did a bit of research and tried to find a few things online and put my ideas down. It's a little bit dry, it's not as much fun as your ones, I'll get better at writing the blogs, but on the website, if you want to check it out, at www.thesoccercoachingpodcast.com, we've got a blog section now, and you've written 2 good ones, and my one's in there now on managing behaviour. It's worth a little look, and what I try to take the approach is, first of all, okay, what can we do as coaches in the moment to manage our own behaviour first, because I am not good at this one, in the sense of, it comes to me like a bit of a curveball, and I don't react very well, because I'm surprised. I've been sport about good behaviour, so I don't always react the best in the moment, and therefore I can make a situation worse. I think if coaches, we can manage in the moment better, that's the first thing. And the second thing is really about trying to create an environment which you proactively try and dissuade bad behaviour and encourage good practice. And then other techniques in which, when it does happen, what you should and shouldn't do. And one of the things I thought that Phil did mention was that the 45 minutes, someone to calm back down again, which that blew me away a little bit, thinking, obviously you don't get that opportunity in football to take a player out for 45 minutes and put him back on again. The game's over. Our age group it is anyway. So you kind of got, but then just knowing the fact actually they might not have calmed down fully. So be reasonable in your expectations around what you think the players and how they might react, because actually it's human nature here as much as anything. I totally agree. I think there were some other good, and just, it's worth reading that blog, but it is a very good blog. Did it, just one question, we did writing the blog and then speaking to Phil, did it kind of change your views on things at all, or were you kind of, was it? I was hesitant about posting it, because I can't remember to post it. I posted it a day or two before we sat with Phil. Phil, so I was thinking, but no, I think it was okay. I think it was the same stuff in there. I mean, you can tackle these things in different ways, can't you? But what comes through quite consistently is about having those clear expectations, setting a high bar, building rapport with the players. Managing in that craft between what you pick up and what you do and let go, but being consistent in that, being fair, being engaging. And I do think, again, I'm not trying to have a go at coaches here, and some coaches have some real challenging players from all different ages, so I totally get that, and they may have their own issues. The players got their own issues to deal with, so medical ones or learning ones, so that there could be those things come into play as well. But I do think sometimes the other problems that coaches have is if you don't manage a session right, in the sense that transition between practices, if it takes a bit too long and the players then get too much time to do stuff, and muck around a little bit. If your interventions are too long, you're talking too much, then again you're going to lose. It's always those ones that kind of aren't quite mature enough to listen for 2 or 3 minutes. Actually, not with maturity. Just some players are quite good at just switching off, and they'll behave themselves for minutes just because they're not listening to you anyway. They're just switching off. But other players, once they're switched off, then they can't help but kick out a little bit, poke someone, do something. And they're not. It's not high level disruptiveness, but it's low level stuff that then you start talking to them, and it's taking the intervention last even longer now. So I think as coaches we can sometimes do a bit more to help the situation by trying to avoid those kind of things.
So it's planning, really, being prepared for the training session, planning. So if you are using cones for one reason or another, make sure the cones are ready
Definitely,
to go. I think someone else, I remember someone telling us it's a session within a session.
All unfolds almost. You build things out.
You're just lifting cones up rather than putting cones down all the time.
You get more out of the session, don't you? Get more time. The players don't get bored. There's not that thing with your eye, because once your eyes are off them, you just don't know, do you? You're at their mercy again, and and they're kids, right? Often they're kids. Well, even teenagers or young adults can. I've done coaching courses where I've seen coaches, that us on coaches were mucking around and stuff. As soon as the coach isn't talking to us, we're pinging balls in the goal, or joining the crossbar challenge. Exactly. So it's not just a kids thing.
Yeah. But I think there's a couple of other things that come through as well. It was around player ownership, and the other one was routines, which I liked which I like to do. So I think you obviously do free play at the beginning. It's like a routine. They turn up, they know that they got free play for 15-20 minutes. Then they can come into their session, and also I guess there's a routine within the session, right? They know what the three things. Well, they knew what they were last year: respect, effort, fun. They know what they're going to learn, what the new three things are this year, which you just started to talk to them about. So I think that routine, I think, is really important. I think in life as well, like I'm certainly a routine person, whereas I like to, if I'm going to work, I like to know, get this train, I like to be off my desk at this point, I leave at this point, if I can make it work that way.
I think kids really, really appreciate it. They're like a safe space.
Yeah.
And I don't think they mind discipline. They honestly, I think they quite like it. They won't ever ask you, but they quite like it. The fact they know that, these are the rules and the boundaries. And the routine, without being boring, so what you do within the routine will change, obviously, not within the same session every week, but the structure, the framework stays the same, but what you deliver is a bit different.
Yeah.
I do, from my experience, students really like that. Your point about the three things and changing, just to be clear, because it's a good point, I wasn't clear in the last episode about that. So last season we had get on the ball quickly, make good decisions, and play tough. And this season we're changing it to outwork, outthink, outplay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our principles of play. The respect, effort, fun, that's our values. They don't change. They stay. That's been there from day one, and that will stay there as far as I'm concerned for day ever. Yeah. And that's a good point. That's different. That's our overall approach to everything we do within the club. There's our values. So they do not change. That's not a football thing. It's respect, effort, fun.
Yeah.
And we speak about that. So that's respectful, regardless. In the session, obviously it relates to that, and in matches, but also relates to what you're doing walking around, off the pitch, on the pitch, around the pitch, anything that kind of relates to the club. I even start to talk about at school. Sometimes I have a parent say to me, "Oh look, little Jimmy's not coming to train tonight because he was naughty last night. So I'm sorry, Scott, but you hope you don't mind. No problem at all."
Yeah.
And I say, "Would you want me to say anything to training next Saturday?" And they'll say, often parents say, "Do you mind having a quiet word with him?" And I'll be like, "No problem at all." So during the session, I'll put him to one side and say, "Look, just so you understand, what do you mean? I love you being here. I want you as much as you can be here. But more important than anything else is your behaviour in and out of the session and stuff like that." And I think it's just having that constant reminder that being respectful is really important. And it's in that order. Respect first, then effort, then fun.
Yeah.
And
so that's like, it's almost becoming life skills as well as what you do at football.
Definitely.
Training and matches.
But then it makes the sessions better, right? Because if they know, actually, do you know what? When you come to Scott sessions, he doesn't accept the fact that you're disrespectful to each other or anybody else, that you're not putting effort in and you're not making it fun for everybody. And I think and kids don't mind that. It's not, you can't, I don't, but if you say, well, why is it that way, Scott? Why isn't it fun first? Surely it should be fun first. I think, well, hold on a minute, how can you have fun if there's no respect or effort? It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. I think fun's really, really important. It is the most important thing after respect and effort, because the playground's different. But in our world and what we're trying to do here, we're trying to develop people and players, right? The character side of a good person, not good as in what I think a good person is, but just some of those, general life skills about, just being respectful to people and having a good attitude and, understanding about having a good work ethic and things. Yeah. They're important. So when you've got those in place, the managing behaviour bit also becomes a bit easier because that environment's already created. Yeah. So the principles are a bit different to those values. Those values will always stay.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Sound all right? Well, I hope that was useful for people. Oh, good.
Definitely. I just want to say one last thing. I think Phil come across really well in the podcast as well. Just his knowledge and experience was
a really entertaining and interesting guy with a great background. So look him up, have a look at his work. He's written a bunch of books around managing behaviour, even some relating to football as well. Lots of stuff out there. Really grateful for him doing the episodes. He's very much in demand and got a busy life, so for him to spare us that time was a real privilege for us. I hope there was something for you guys out of that. Please, if you can, share the episode with anyone that you might feel is relevant to share it with. But if you want to leave us a review, we'd like that as well, regardless of what you say. Just give us the feedback. If you want to email us, you can at info@thesoccercoachpodcast.com. Twitter, we're at SoccerCoachCast. Any feedback from Mark and I is always welcome. And yeah, we'll look forward to speaking to the next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, sound
Excellent.
good?
Yep.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.